Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matra Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. So Mark, do you remember what verse we're on? I think we're still in the 15th chapter.
16th chapter, verse 52.
16th chapter?
No, that's what I have.
Is that right?
Chapter 16, right? Or 15?
Yeah, okay, chapter 16. All right. I'm slow. Verse 52. Who's chanting tonight?
Verse 52.
Verse 52.
Tasmat chanena manasa bhasate tat param vapuhu iti ragni ritam shrutva vashtavakra punarjagao. Therefore, that supreme essence shines through a pure mind. Thus, having heard what was told by the king, Ashtavakra spoke again.
So, what we've talking about in this very subtle part of the teaching, what is it that we need to do? Remember, we've talked about how it is both unknowable and knowable. The mind cannot know it, yet the mind can realize it. So, what is it that needs to happen? First of all, to identify what is it that knows the self as a direct experience. It is the self itself. How do you know you are you? You do not see, hear, taste, touch, smell, emote, or think yourself. Yet you know you are. Yourself is Swayambhu, self-evident. Swayam Jyoti, self-shining, self-effulgent. But the great cosmic joke is everybody already has it. You talk to the person who's suffering terribly. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm suffering. My life is so bad. Oh, I'm so sorry. By the way, do you exist? Of course I exist. What's your existence like? My existence is miserable. Do you know this misery? Oh, yes. Do I know this misery? Nobody knows how miserable I am. So they're still thundering the Vedantic truth. I am, I know, I shine. So where is the problem? The locus of the problem is in the mind. Both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. Or philosophically, we say it is not an ontological problem. Ontology is where I have a change in being. It's not that this miserable little jiva is going to be changed into wonderful Brahman. It's not going to be glued on to Brahman. I'm not going to fall into some ocean of Brahman. No, it is an epistemological problem. It's a problem of knowing. Knowing, I get all confused in my mind because of the nature of ignorance. I superimpose upon the self all sorts of nonsense. Primarily, I think on my body. How do I get out of it? First of all, we have to have a mind that is sattvic. Because it's subtle. So we have all these preparatory practices. We do japa, we do asana, we do pranayama, we do tirtha, we do all sorts of things that we have as practices, which have as their goal purification of the mind. But that in itself is not all of it. That just prepares the mind. Then in a subtle intellect, where I have reduced the frequency and volume of thoughts, by viveka, discrimination, vairagya, dispassion, letting it all go. Then with an introverted attentive faculty, I investigate. I, koham, well, who am I? In a mind made very pure, in the space between your thoughts, that subtle intellect sees, oh, there's no one there. Those of us on Monday night who are studying the Yoga Vasishtha text, we're introduced to one of my favorite descriptions of the Supreme, Chid Akash. Akasha means space or sky. Chit, pure awareness. So what do I see inside? What do I recognize? Vast, empty space of awareness. And then the subtle intellect goes, it has the awakening. I go, oh, there is no person in there. Satchidananda Rupa. So this is what Janaka has said is to happen. Now, Ashtavakra has a little few more questions going on.
Rajasattva yoktam anyebhya. Actually, I'm going to restart. Rajam sattva yoktam anyebhya paravrittir hi manasi kevalachit sapara chit manasa pravibhasate. King, if there is mere turning back of the mind from other objects, that supreme consciousness shines through the mind. This has been declared by you.
So all that we need to do, remember we had the discussion, how do I know, how do I investigate an object? If I'm going to investigate the water glass, I have to turn my attention away from the lamp, from the chair, from the little Buddha over there. So I turn away from other objects, focus on what I'm being attentive to. What Janaka has said with the self, all you got to do is get rid of all the know-abo. And what remains is the know. And yet, when the objects are there, who is it who sees them all? In the end, it's the most ordinary awareness of the natural waking state. Yes, we say, tune up the mind, introvert your energy. But that's a mind state, also very blissful, but it's a mind state. It has a beginning and an end. It varies in intensity. When I'm just brushing my teeth in the morning, who's aware that I am? So the natural or continuous samadhi, sahaja samadhi, is when I'm deeply rooted in the knowledge I am Brahman all the time, no matter what state the mind is in. My friend Isabel was telling me a story about Swamiji, and she had the great privilege of traveling with him the last couple years of his life. He was quite frail. He had serious heart trouble and diabetes, and they had been traveling. I'm not sure if it was from Asia to the US or Australia back to someplace. Anyway, they'd been traveling like 20 some hours. And as they're getting off the plane, he's just exhausted. And he turns to her and says, "Oh, not much divinity now." He was white. But you don't lose the knowledge of the self. Once you really get what it is. Now, listen very carefully. The scriptures, they say, Shranahu. The sadhak, the seeker, is seen to do spiritual practices so that he may purify his mind and realize his self. Jnani, the man of wisdom, may also be seen to be doing spiritual practices. He may practice samadhi. He may chant his mantra. It does not add to his knowledge of the self. It's just the highest form of worldly pleasure. So this is why the sages revel in the halls of Vedanta. Why, for example, Swami Tapovanam was, what was the name of the great temple that's now in Pakistan? Sharada? Is that the name of the temple? Great Devi Temple? Yeah. And he talks about there just worshiping the mother and chanting for days on end, just reveling in it. This does not add to the Mahatma's knowledge of the self. There's bliss out. And that rises and falls and varies, has endless variation. And it's like counting to the highest number. There's no end to how deeply the mind can revel in the self. And there have been students who are pretty rooted in the knowledge, gone off on 10-day meditation retreats. Back and I ask them, do you know more self now? No, Jim. They've had some nice mind states though. And then if you've got a job in the world, your bliss may diminish a little bit. So do some practices. You know. These are not stages of bondage and liberation. You either see it or you don't. Next verse.
Tatsu shuptau vibhaseta paravrittam manastada tata kim sadhanairanyaihi sukti matra kritarthata. Then consciousness should shine in sleep, since the mind is turned back from objects at that time. Therefore, what is the use of other means? There is accomplishment of one's purpose through mere sleep.
Yes. Well, this is cheap stuff, this Vedanta. If turning back from objects is all that's necessary, why not take an Ambien, go to sleep? Is that what self-realization is? Now, there's lots of subtle stuff inferred by this particular doubt raised. Practically speaking, we have two experiences that happen in meditation that we need to talk about. One is called manolaya, and the other is called manonasha. Laya is when the mind dissolves into unconsciousness. What does it feel like? You're sitting in meditation, and everything gets kind of thin. The mind starts to just the nods and lie. It's not bad. if you're incredibly stressful, achieving manolaya can be very useful and restful. If you take a yoga class and at the end they have you do the corpse pose, and they kind of do some sort of guided meditation, pretty soon you'll hear someone over there going, they've fallen asleep because they're deeply relaxed. That's laya. When you are teaching a class, look. And if you see your students' body postures collapse, they're in laya. So maybe very erect, and then the next thing goes the head. Laya. People can get stuck there for decades thinking they're meditating. The mind of meditation is silent, but vigilant and alert. Without thought, you are fully awake and awake. I like to think of like a cat stalking like a moth. It's incredibly still, just watching before it jumps. That's like the mind of meditation. Or you've been to a party and you had a beer, and you're driving home, and the next thing you know, there's a cop car behind you. All of a sudden, hands at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, make sure you're only going 55 miles an hour, and you are fully alert because you don't want to get a ticket. That's mind of meditation. So it's important for us to understand that deep sleep, though it is the withdrawal of the mind from all objects, and it's similar nomenclature in the tradition, manolaya, does nothing to free us. Next verse.
Iti parno yuktortha viprenovacha bhupatihi samahit shrunu brahman samadhanam vadami te. Then the king, further questioned by the Brahmana, said, Brahmana, I shall tell you the answer to your objection. Hear with concentration.
Next verse.
Satyam sushuptau manasa paravrittastu sarvatha linam manasatvam chapya asya katham tam abhasayet. Truly, there is turning back of the mind from objects completely in sleep. The mind nature or ability to manifest objects of the mind is dissolved in sleep, being covered by darkness or tamas. How can it manifest pure consciousness?
Yes. So in the darkness of deep sleep, the mind is in the state of pure ignorance. Now, I'm going to go a little bit into the technology of what's happening. So we've talked a bit about vasana. A vasana is an impression that's left in the unconscious as the result of previously performed egoistic actions. It's what impels me into doing stuff. You can't really see a vasana. You can only infer a vasana by its effects. They're like, well, I like to use the example of spring bulbs. I used to grow dahlias in the city. And, you know, if it's a dinner plate dahlia or it's a pom-pom dahlia, you can't tell by looking at the bulbs. Got to put them in the ground and let them grow. We'll see. So you can tell what they are by their effects, not by looking at the bolts. It's the same with a vasana. A vasana has two powers: veiling power, vritti, projecting power, vikshepa, shakti. The avritti is a spiritual sleep. The vikshepa shakti is when the mind then projects a phenomenal world. So if the mind is still covered by vasana, you get rid of the objects, and what have you got? Pure ignorance, avritti. Sometimes called the avyakta, the unmanifest. Pure vasana is the same as deep sleep. So we discussed this very clearly in Mandukya Upanishad. In the beginning, we say there's three mind states: waking, dream, and deep sleep. And the turiya is the consciousness in which they all three move. And in the second chapter, Gaudapada says, well, actually, you've only got two mind states: deep sleep and dream. There's a daytime dream and there's a nighttime dream. The point being is we want to not only remove the vikshepa shakti, the phenomena, we want to remove the ignorance too. How do I know my mind is under the influence of vasana? I feel like a person. I think I'm Jim, and I have this problem and that problem. How do I know that my mind is free from vasana? It's clear to me that I am that partless Brahman. Brahmasmi. So, deep sleep does nothing to enlighten us. We not only need to get rid of the phenomena, but also the ignorance. How do I do it? Keep discriminating. One of my favorite verses, I think it's 267 in Vivekachudamani. It's important enough to me to memorize. Even after realization of the self, there exists a strong impression that one is the doer and the enjoyer, which is the cause of rebirth. This needs to be conscientiously rooted out by steady and continuous identification with the self. The annihilation of the vasanas here and now is considered liberation by the wise. So even after I've had some of these glimpses into the infinite, there exists this impression, this egoism, that I'm karta, bhokta, doer and enjoyer, which is the cause for rebirth. What it really means here is I identify again. I think I'm this meat lump. It's the way out. Stay in the position of Sakshibhava, the witness, constantly discriminating. To whom did this feeling happen? To me, who am I? Oh, wait, drop. Viveka, Viveka. Stay with this slogan. If I feel like a person, I'm deluded. If I'm identified with the ego, the mind will say, resolve ego's struggle. Play whack-a-mole with the world to try to fix yourself. Yoga says, drop it. Yeah. Conscientiously root it out through steady and continuous identification with the self until all vasanas are removed. You never lose it. It's effortless, continuous. Meaning, just as today, you don't wake up in the morning worried like the fellow in the Kafka short story, oh my gosh, have I become a cockroach? No, you know your body's human. You're not a goat or a cow or a dog or a pig. You don't have to remember it or work at it or discriminate. It's clear. So also for the person of wisdom. It's natural. It's continuous. Effortless. Next verse.
Kajjalena samalipte darpane gaganam nahi anyebhyastu paravrittim atrena bhasate kvachit. When a mirror is covered with soot, space does not at all appear by
I think
reflection.
soot is the way we pronounce it in America.
Space does not at all appear by reflection anywhere by the mere turning back of the mirror from other objects.
So if I have a dirty mirror and I want to reflect the sky, remember we used this, I think, a couple weeks ago. If you have a mirror and you hold it out at eye level, all you see is other things. But if you turn it this way and you look in the mirror, oh, you can see the sky reflected in it. You've turned it away from objects. But if the mirror is dirty, turning it away from the objects doesn't do any good. Oh, mirror's dirty. So also, we have to remove the ignorance. What is the ignorance? Ravasana. What is the ignorance? The non-apprehension of myself. Next verse.
Evam vilapte manasi nidra anya paravrite ayogya twadeva mano bhasayena chitin kvachit. Thus, when the mind is covered by the darkness of sleep, just on account of its turning back from other objects, the mind cannot manifest or reveal pure consciousness anywhere on account of its unfitness.
Yes. So what is it that the mind needs to do? One of the technical words we have is pratyabhinyanam, recognition. So the mind comes to an end. You're fully aware. And then when the mind returns, it recollects on the direct experience of I with nothing to see. And it goes, aha, I get it. Nobody there. It sees its own fundamental unreality. Here's the self, here's the mind, waking state, dream state, deep sleep, samadhi. The return from samadhi. Oh my gosh, there's nothing there. Why can the mind do that? Because I am the substratum of everything. I do not disappear when the mind disappears. Remember our exercise a couple weeks ago, hand rubbing. The instrument for hand rubbing is hands. We do another experience, reflection. Is it warm or is it cold? It's warm. Is it motion or stasis? It's motion. If I sit on my hands, okay, now rub your hands with your mind. You can't do it. Nor do the hands themselves reflect. Likewise, I am eyeing, selfing all the time. And in a very pure mind. Reflect on that. Who hears the traffic going by? Just being heard. In space. And it's the subtle intellect. So, next verse.
Anyatha loshtakutyau derapi bhayat kuto nasa tasmat yogena manasa shuddhena bhasate hisa. Otherwise, why cannot that consciousness shine through a lump of earth, a wall in the light? Therefore, that consciousness shines through a fire and pure mind alone. Sorry, through a fit and pure mind alone.
So just like light can only shine through a transparency and shine through a clean window, can't shine through a wall. So also in a pure mind, made very becomes clear. One of my favorite images is at a pool party. A bunch of kids are splashing around and somebody loses a ring or a necklace. So how do you find it? Well, if everybody's splashing around, you cannot see it. So what do you do to the kids? You say either get out of the pool or stand very still. And then when the surface of the water becomes quiet, someone says, oh, there it is, down by the 4-foot marker. You can dive in and get it. So the root of the mind, the substratum of the ego, the ground of being, language fails us, is difficult to apprehend when the surface of the mind is splashing around. Get out. And look. Who am I? Look behind your eyes. Notice the knower. You don't get a new self. See clearly in the intellect the self you've always been. You just didn't know it. What we're looking for, we are looking with. It's the awareness of stuff without the stuff. Next verse.
Ata sadyo jata shisho bhasate nahi kinchana athapi shrinu vakshyami mashilipte hi darpane alakshitam chapi makshi pratibimba namasti vai sashleshana vilakshyeta swabhava syana pohanat. Therefore, nothing whatever shines. For instance, for a just born infant, Then, hear what I shall tell you. In a mirror covered by ink, even though the reflection of the ink is not seen, it indeed exists on the account of the non-removal of the mirror's own nature. It cannot be seen on account of contact of the mirror with ink.
So, the reflection of the ink is in the mirror, but it covers the mirror. Can't see it. Or to use Ramana Maharshi's great example of the movie projector, the lamp is like the self, the mind is like the film, the image on the screen is my life, my world that I see. Deep sleep is when you've got the lens cap on. Lamp's on. Film may be going even. Some people say we dream a lot in deep sleep, you just don't remember it. But what shows up on the screen? Nothing. Another image. What is the difference between a blind person and a sighted person in a dark room? Blind person can't see. If I light a match in a dark room, blind person doesn't see it. But a sighted person, if the room is pitch black, they are seeing darkness. As soon as you light a match, they see it. Puneet, did you sleep the night through? Didn't get up to go to the bathroom? No. Did you? Yeah. I got up to go to the bathroom. How did I know it? Because I was there watching the sleeping mind, and when the mind woke up because I had to go pee, I knew that. When I went back to bed, now came the shuddering. Next verse.
Tatha mana sushuptistham sanlishtam nidrayaiva hi atonyebhya paravritte bhavad bhasa yenatam. So also the mind which is in the state of sleep is united with sleep alone. Therefore, on account of not turning back from other objects, it, the mind, does not manifest or reveal that consciousness. There is a note. Like the mirror covered by ink, the mind is united with or covered by darkness of sleep. Therefore, the complete withdrawal from objects is absent, since the mind is still joined to the darkness of sleep as the mirror is united with the ink.
So what he's basically saying, you haven't really turned your mind back from all objects. There is one object you have still to remove. the big lump of darkness. This is why frequently the Hatha yoga yogis, the Raja yogis, have what we call a Jada Samadhi. Jada means inert. Huff and puff. And you're high. But your experience is, I know nothing. The ego remains. And your experience is, I am still there, the ego knowing the nothing. I may be high because I hyperventilate. How do I destroy the mind? And when we say manonasha, we don't mean enfeeblement. How do I end the mind? The annihilation of the vasanas here and now is considered liberation by the wise. How do I annihilate the vasanas? Give up attachment and identification. The last attachment has been let go of. You snipped that last vasana. The mind will end. Oh, well, I know if I have samadhi. That's kind of like an 8-year-old asking a mature man, will I know it when I have an orgasm? Don't worry. It's its nature to destroy all doubt. What does samadhi reveal? Samadhi reveals our essential nature. Don't go chasing Nirvikalpa. Instead, stay focused on, who am I? And if you have moments where ignorance returns, keep doing the tapas. Vairagya, that desire, doesn't mean we've accomplished it overnight, to give up all attachments to enjoyments gained through the senses and aversions, that's implied here. And that desire to give up all identification. No personal sense of self, starting from the body up to and including Brahma, the creator. I'm a powerful, important person. And most importantly, don't try to be an enlightened person. Remember, realize that you are Brahman. It's a big difference. Two kinds of people in the world. Those who think they're a person and they're in ignorance. And that includes people who think they're enlightened. Then there are those rare souls who know I'm not a person of any kind. Aham Nirvikalpa. Sangoham, 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 Puna Puna, Sachidananda Rupa, Aham Mevaham Avyaya. Unattached, unattached, unattached am I again and again. My form is existence, consciousness, bliss absolute. I am. Talk about the four Mahavakyas. Ajnanam Brahma, Brahman is consciousness. I am Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman. Tattvamasi, you are that. The fourth one does not say Aham Mahatma, Aham Jnani. It says Aham Brahmasmi. Very important. Next verse.
Ato nitra smrtirapi vyutti tasya hi sambhavet mudhatapi jata tasyam dashayam anubhuyate. Therefore, on account of the mind grasping the darkness of sleep, there can be the remembrance of sleep for one who has woken up, and also of the insensibility which has been experienced in that state.
So this proves you are aware and illuminating darkness, because I can ask you, did you sleep well last night? If you say yes, you are remembering it. The rememberer and the experiencer must be the same entity. You ask me, did I sleep well last night? You do not know, as I told you. Why do you not know? You weren't there. So that's the common proof that in fact the self illumines the darkness of deep sleep is through what we call the law of memory. Now, don't worry about it. Nobody ever got enlightened in deep sleep. If all this discussion about sleep seems to be kind of convoluted and heady, forget it. Practically speaking, it is far more important when we're meditating. Understand the difference between manolaya, when I fall asleep in meditation, on meditation. Manonasha, when I end the mind, but awareness remains. That's the point of all this. Next verse.
Tatte samyak pravakshami shrinu samyak samahitah manasastu vidhavastha prakasharma abhedatah. I shall tell you completely about that nature of sleep and absorption in pure consciousness. Hear well with concentration. The state of the mind exists in two ways: light or pure knowledge and deliberation.
That's just straightforward. Let's go on.
Bahir theshu vishrantirya prakasha sa uchyate yasta dvichara swasmina vaisa virmashya udahritah. That is called light, or prakasha, pure knowledge, which is mere resting on objects outside. That is declared as deliberation, or vimarsha, which is investigation within the mind itself.
Yes. So what we want to do when we just look out and illumine objects, emotions, and thoughts, prakasha, like a flashlight or a torch, I guess they call it in India, shining on things. Here, We want to turn within and investigate the awareness itself. What is my essential nature? When I discard all the accretions, all the upadhis we call them, what remains? I am not the body. I am not the prana. I am not the feelings. I am not the thoughts. I'm not any thought of self that occurs in the subtle intellect. I'm also not the darkness of deep sleep. Who am I? Next one.
Jim, I have
Yes.
a bit of a practical question.
Yes.
I don't know if this is a common experience, but certainly it's my experience that whenever I attempt meditation, very often I start out by hitting almost what you would call a wall of sleep, and persisting through it once clearly emerges on the other side where the sleep is gone, there is clarity. But I mean, it happens very, very often. So I'm wondering if I'm doing something wrong or it's a common something.
Welcome to the same experience that everybody gets. Uday, you are such a common yogi. They wrote a book about you 1,000 years ago. If you go back in the beginning and reread the story of Hemaleka and Hemachyuta.
Right.
Hemachyuta goes up on top of his castle, his palace, his crystal palace, and he meditates. And remember, we had all those descriptions of the things he experiences. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
He sees light, he sees darkness, and then what happens next?
He falls asleep.
He falls asleep. You're not doing anything wrong. But if it's persistent, here are some techniques. First of all, try meditating with your eyes open. And then if it helps, just feel your energy above your head so it doesn't sink down.
Okay.
If you're doing japa, you can say the japa more loudly in your mind. Make sure your posture stays good. People ask, oh, should I meditate lying down? If you have a disability, maybe. But for the vast majority of people, if they try to meditate lying down, they're going to fall asleep. But you're not doing anything wrong. Know that most yogis go through this. Anybody else have a question? All right, next verse.
Prakasho nirvikalpa syat vastunam avibhedatah vimarsha shabda sambhedat vibhedat savikalpakah. Light or pure knowledge would be without thought constructs on account of absence of division of objects. Deliberation would be accompanied by thought constructs on account of division due to the mixing of words.
So, the pure light of pure awareness, either shining on an object or in Samadhi, Nirvikalpa, Nirvikalpa, without anything. Deliberation, the vimarsha, is when I start to think about stuff. And there's useful deliberation. Who am I? Neti neti, the drishya viveka. Those are useful deliberations. But in the end, those stop. Next one.
Ayame vavidha iti shabdha sambheda varjitaha vastu darshana rupaus sao prakasho nirvikalpakaha. That lighter knowledge, which consists of a mere perception of the object and is bereft of the mixing of words such as this is of such a kind, is nirvikalpa, or without thought constructs.
Yes. So this is when we see the world simply as direct perception without the addition of stories. Now, let me share with you our normal process of perception. So I'm out at the beach in San Francisco, and I look out to sea, and I see a white object. Direct perception. Nirvikalpa. Then the intellect comes in and starts a deliberation. What is it? Is it a buoy? Is it a container ship? Is it a sailboat? And then it determines the suchness of it, the thatness of it. Ah, it's a sailboat. Then mind comes in and says, oh, I love sailing. Oh, it would be so wonderful to be out there on the ocean in a sailboat. I can remember when I used to go sailing with my father back in LA. Oh, those were some of my favorite childhood memories. Let me look again. Is it one mast or is it two masts? Are they flying? And then I start to have story and feeling and memory. So that's the normal way the mind works. So again, there's a practice implied. You can usually probably in the beginning only do this for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Go for a walk. Keeping the mind as still as you can. Look. Simply see. Without the superimposition of all these memories and stories and associations. Developing, bringing the mind to a single. Swamiji used to say a single-pointed mind is as good as no mind. Whatever you're doing in the world, totally absorb yourself into it. Next verse.
Ayame ayameva vavidham iti vastudarshan mulakah shabda sambhinna rupasva vicharatma vabhasanah. That which appears with the nature of investigation and has the characteristic of being combined with words such as this is such a kind, and which has the mere perception of objects as its origin or cause, is savikalpa, or accompanied by thought constructs.
Yes. So if I have thought constructs and perception in the world, things in the world, we call that savikalpa. Now, that term savikalpa is frequently associated with the term samadhi, savikalpa samadhi. This is absolute equanimity of mind while I still have a perception of the world. When we talk about getting tuned up and functioning in the world, that's savikalpa samadhi. Let's do one more.
Antaro bhinavonyo va vimarsha iti kirtitah tatra yo bhinava bhasa saprokto nubhavatmakah. Deliberation of such a kind is declared as internal or dependent on mental imagery and is either new or another. There, the appearance which is quite new is said to be of the nature of experience.
I have no idea what he meant by that. Is there a note?
There is no note.
Read it again, please.
Deliberation of such a kind is declared as internal or dependent on mental imagery and is either new or another. There, that appearance which is quite new is said to be of the nature of experience.
I think it means when I see something, I tend to want to compare it to what I already know. And if I can't find something to compare it to, it's brand new. What is that? It looks like a camel, but it's got two humps instead of one. Let's do one more and see if he clarifies it. And I'll let you go.
Anya smritya nusandhana atmaka sansakara sambhavaha evam mano dviprakara shaktiyuktam sadastitam. The other, which is of the nature of remembrance and investigation, is born of impressions on the memory due to previous experiences. Thus, the mind always exists, possessing two kinds of power: prakasha, knowledge, and vimarsha, deliberation or thought constructs.
Okay, now I understand. So the prior verse is saying, when I see something I've never seen before and it's new, I don't have story. No vimarsha, no deliberation. The other kind is when I see something and I have association with memory, then I have deliberation. All right, we need to quit. We'll stop here and go on with these very subtle mind states that he's talking about. What number are we on?
We're going to do 71 next.
71 next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Oh, that's it. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Did you drive?
I drove.
Can you get him to the BART on time?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. I think the BART's only 9:35 now. So
Oh, really?
it's
To reduce the frequency of it?
yeah, earlier